Hey guys, Jay Robarge Performance here. Okay, yeah, here I go with the book out again. This is bound to get pretty boring. Alright, so if you want to learn something here that maybe you're not that familiar with these things, but common complaint on C4 and C6 transmissions is what a lot of guys refer to as 2-3 flare. What this means is during the 2-3 upshift, instead of just being a nice clean shift, it kind of has the engine RPMs kind of rev up and then catch. Almost like it popped into neutral momentarily on the 2-3 shift, and it can be quite annoying, and if it's bad enough it can actually be destructive to the unit. So we're going to take a look at this, and I'm going to explain to you what's happening here and kind of tell you how to fix it. But I'm really going to tell you why it occurs more than what you need to do to fix it, because really fixing this, a lot of the times you're seeing this tends to be with aftermarket valve bodies where somebody's converted them to a full manual, or full manual with trans brake, whatever. These are the ones that tend to have this problem a lot more than stock ones. So to understand this, let's take a look at something first. So alright, again, if you don't understand the 2-3 flare, so if you picture this as a graph of RPM, so say you're in first gear and RPMs are climbing, and then when you shift to second, you get a drop in RPM, like a sudden drop when the shift occurs. Okay, so say you're in second, it drops, so now you start building RPM again slowly, and then when you go to shift into third, what the flare is going to do, it's going to all of a sudden bounce up. RPMs are going to bounce up and spike and then come back down, and then you'll start building back up on your ramp again. Start building RPM again. I hope that sort of makes sense to you, but I think if you're watching this video, you already know what I'm talking about. So basically the problem is this. It has to do with primarily the design of the valve body. So in first gear, so if you're in first, the only clutch that's on is forward. Now if it's a valve body that has engine braking, the low reverse clutch is also on, but let's not really worry about that. That's not so relative to this 2-3 flare issue. So first gear, forward is on. Second gear, forward is still on, and then the servo apply comes in. So what that is the intermediate band comes on. If you're familiar with the piston, okay, your servo piston has two sides. It's got a small side, and then it's got a larger side, so it kind of looks like this. So the small is your apply, okay, and then the big side is the release. And that's really the key. So when we shift to third, forward is still on. That just remains on. Servo apply is on. And then what happens to shift into third, we get servo release oil, and we also get direct clutch, or reverse high clutch, as Ford likes to call it. And the reason it's called that is because that clutch pack is on in reverse and high gear. Okay, so here's the issue. Here's what's happening. And let's look at this for a second here. This is the hydraulic schematic. So here, this is your oil going to your forward clutch. Not real concerned with that right now. So what happens is this. If you look at this here, this is the key. You have apply oil on and you have release oil both on. So because like I told you, the release side of the piston is larger, it's going to overcome the small apply side of the servo, and it's going to push it off. There's also a spring in here that helps assist that as well. And that spring is really there more for rest position, because rest position, you don't want the band engaged. So this is the key here. Factory valve body, you're going to have apply and release on at the same time. Okay? Your aftermarket valve bodies, and the reason some of them tend to have this issue, when you shift into third, the apply oil goes away. This goes to exhaust, and then usually we don't use hydraulic release on something like that. So in third gear, there's no oil going to this servo at all, typically. And then the oil will just come on the reverse high clutch. They simplify the circuit. It makes it a lot easier to build and design like that. But the issue with that is it has this 2-3 flare or overspeed or whatever you want to call it. So let's look at this. Okay, so in your circuit, like I kind of just showed you there, so this is your direct clutch. This is the release side of the servo. This is the apply side, okay? So to shift into third, what's supposed to happen is you've already got oil to the apply side, okay? That's already getting oil. So to make the shift, usually, you know, if we're talking about the stock valve body, you have, I'm not going to draw this properly, but this is a shift valve. And let's say it's the 2-3 shift valve. Okay, so you have pilot oil waiting at this valve. Okay, this is pilot. And what that means is just the source oil. So oil is sitting there. When the valve is stroked, oil comes off the valve and it comes out. It goes to the direct clutch, and it also branches off to go to the release side of the servo. Okay, it kind of splits like that. At least that's in the factory design. Your aftermarket design, what's going to happen when you make the 2-3 shift is the oil to the apply side is going to go to exhaust. Okay, that's going to exhaust out, and we're going to remove this branch. Okay, that branch is removed, going to the release side. We're just not going to use that side of the servo anymore. And the oil goes to the direct. So what's happening, and the reason you get the flare, is if you go back to our chart here, we're in second gear, so servo apply is on. So we want to shift to third. So in third, servo apply is going to go away. And what happens when that goes away, we go back to first gear until direct clutch comes in and that drum locks up. So as those clutches wear, or if you have a lot of clearance in it, more power, the car's heavier, maybe not a lot of gear, it increases this window of time that you get this little spike where, and what this is This is basically a shift back to first. Is this little spike we're looking at here? You know, we're talking a fraction of a second. We're not talking, you know, a long period of time, but as the unit gets more worn and things, this gets longer, okay, this overspeed. So, you know, maybe at first it's only 100 or 200 RPM. As things wear out, or maybe you put more power to it, or the heavier the car is, whatever, you know, instead of being a fraction of a second, now it becomes a half a second. So now it's, you know, the shift RPM is buzzing up 500 RPM before it grabs. You know, it just starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it can get very frustrating. So here's the deal. When you're shopping for one of these valve bodies, or say you already have one of these valve bodies that is modified in this way, where apply goes to exhaust and we're not using release side of the servo anymore, that's going to cause this issue, and you're always going to be fighting it. And, you know, guys have some tricks to try to fix it. They'll take the release side of the servo, and in this release side, in the oil passage, they'll try to put a restrictor in here so that when you shift from second to third and this oil and the apply side is exhausting, it'll change this. And I'm sorry, a lot of times they'll put that restrictor, over here on your apply side. You can also do it in the release, but if you don't have release oil, this doesn't work, so I apologize for that. But so you'll put a restrictor in here. So what'll happen is this oil won't bleed off so quickly, and this gives this direct clutch more time to come on. But this is something that you can sit and work out for a particular circumstance. But as things wear or power changes, weight of vehicle, etc., this will just keep creeping back on you. It's really, my experience, just a losing battle. So the real way to correct this is you have to just go back to the Ford engineers here. So what's happening is, because the apply oil is staying on, we get a chance to pre-charge this circuit, and that way everything fills up with oil before it pushes your band off. And that's going to help prevent that 2-3 overspeed. Now, in theory, this causes an overlap, which means direct clutch comes on and the band is still engaged. And if they were to both be on at the same time, it would lock the transmission up. So if the timing is incorrect there as well, instead of the flare, you'll get the opposite, where the trans wants to momentarily lock up and it really lugs the car down. Or sometimes you may notice it as a extremely firm 2-3 shift. It just feels like you almost got rear-ended in a way. There's a difference between a really firm shift and a shift that's just got too much overlap and it's just binding up on you. So that's something you really have to be aware of as well. And when we design valve bodies here, I actually do it. I make sure apply oil stays on and we fill the circuit like the factory would, because that works the best. And you can fool with this timing. Things that will change this is the relationship between how big the apply piston is and the release piston. Because that'll, the closer they are in size, the slower it's going to push the servo off. That's why, for example, on a C4, for example, there's an R servo for a C4. and not to be confused with the C6R servo. But that servo, what's unique about it is it's got the same apply area as an A servo. A servo has a large release and a somewhat small apply. What they did with the R servo is the apply side stayed the same, but the release side was a smaller diameter. So if somebody's having a 2-3 shift issue, a flare issue, if you go to that R servo, a lot of times that'll cure it. That's why a lot of guys like that R servo. Man, I'm having this 2-3 flare issue. I've been told to put the R servo in it. And again, I am talking about a C4, not a C6. C6 is a little different on that. It's the same principle, but that C6R servo is different than the C4R servo. The C6R servo has a very large release side. If anything, that servo, what it's going to do is decrease overlap. Okay, it has the opposite effect. Now, typically, and I've told you before in another video, that your stock valve bodies, I don't care if you put a shift kit in them or not, that's kind of irrelevant, but the auto shift valve body typically doesn't have this issue like a lot of the aftermarket ones, because they are keeping the supply oil on. But they do sometimes have it, if clutches are badly worn or you have a sealing issue in the unit. And also, if it's, an engine that's got some power and the pressure just isn't adequate, you can still get this 2-3 flare. So it may be a lack of pressure or the pressure just not rising fast enough. Those are the typical reasons that you get it in a stock type valve body. And I know this is probably a bit confusing to you, but I'm not really sure how to explain it to you more simply. And this is really probably something to be more interested in if you were, doing valve body designs and things. But what I am going to tell you is that if you're going to buy an aftermarket valve body, this may be a question you want to ask. And you're probably going to have a hard time getting the answer because you never actually get to contact usually with somebody, the person that has actually designed it. The company may sell it, but they don't really know about the design aspects of it. This is something I ran into quite a bit when I was getting started in the business, and I was trying to get answers to things, and the people selling these valve bodies a lot of times just didn't know, because you just have a salesperson on the phone. They're not an engineer. I do respond to email and things, and like I said, I am the one that designs these valve bodies here, the ones that we sell. So all the ones that we sell for the C4 and C6 will use the apply oil, and the apply oil will stay on, and it's using the release side of the servo. So one thing I want to say, having said that, and you guys may have seen a lot of things on the internet telling you to do this. They tell you to take your servo, take the small seal off, sometimes tell you to grind notches in that piston and plug a hole in the case. And what this does is it makes the piston one-sided, where the release side is doing both apply and release. The cool thing about that is it's a really inexpensive way to get a larger diameter servo without having to buy an aftermarket servo. But the downside to it is it's not going to work properly with either the stock valve body or any auto shift valve body, and it's not going to work with our manual and trans brake valve bodies. What you're going to notice when you do that in these situations is that you're going to get a bindy, like a momentary tie-up on the 2-3 shift if you do that. So make sure that's not been done to your unit, and don't do it to your unit. Unless you're using somebody else's valve body that no longer uses the release side of the servo. That's something there, that you can do. So I hope this helps a little bit. You know, this is something that, you know, I've already talked about this for 20 minutes, but these videos are kind of hard to, it takes a long time to upload them when they're long and this and that, and I don't think most people will really watch the full thing, so I try to make them quick, but I hope that kind of clears it up. So basically, if you're doing everything you can, you've got good clutches and your sealing rings and all these things are good and everything's just checked properly, and you know, it's a good build is what I'm trying to say, and you're just fighting this tooth free flare, well, if you've got an aftermarket valve body, yeah, it may be time to start looking for a new one. And you know, I'd hope that you would check ours out, because I really feel like if you have one of these more simpler designs that are not keeping the apply oil on, when you go to this style of valve body, you're going to notice a big difference in it. I know you will. I've turned a lot of customers on to this and has solved a lot of problems for them. And if you're dealing with a stock valve, you know, auto shift valve body, and you're getting this, you're probably just not getting enough pressure rise. You know, or maybe, you know, your peak may be high enough, but maybe it's just not ramping up quick enough, and that would be a whole nother discussion on how to fix that or modify that. So I'm going to stop this here. I hope this helps a little bit, and I'm sure I'll find more ways to cover this and make it more simple in the future. But anyways, I know I said I was going to do this, so I just wanted to kind of get this done, and hopefully this sheds some light on it for you. Thanks for watching.